The plain seam. As you can see on the sides, we have written how much seam allowance you're going to need. This is plus a number. So we only need a 1/2 inch of seam allowance on the side that says plus half. Now it says here we're going to cut 2. That means we're going to cut 2 of the pieces with this pattern piece. But you have to flip the pattern piece over when you need to cut 2 of something. We grab our piece of muslin, we place our pattern piece down with the edges that don't need any seam allowance snug against the fabric. Draw with your pencil along the edge of the pattern piece, marking your notches. For your second piece, remember to flip your pattern. Put the right sides of your pattern piece together, so the sides with no pencil marking on it. And as you see, your notches now match up. Now we will pin the seam together, making sure that your pin has gone through the stitch line on both pieces. Always want to match up your notches. Looking at the back to make sure you're coming through at the same spot. You make sure we're just taking a little bite of fabric, about 1/8 of an inch. If you take a bigger bite, the fabric will be able to move. We're going to do 1 parallel pin along the stitch line. This is overkill for this plain seam, but I just want to demonstrate to you how this works. It's essentially doing the running stitch but with a pin. It really helps stabilize the fabric. And you're making sure to look from the back to the front so that the pin is parallel along the stitch line on both pieces of fabric. Now for the sewing. When you are setting yourself up to sew, it is important that the pin heads are facing towards you and that the pointy parts of the pin are facing away from you. That way you can pull out the pins as you're sewing and also you don't get stabbed. And as you can see, this parallel pin, the head of it needs to be facing your body so that you can pull it out as you are sewing. If we flip this around the other way, I would not be able to remove that pin. It's very important that you set up your pinning and your fabric so it's orientated whenever you start sewing. We're going to begin with 3 stitches roughly going forward and then 3 stitches back to create our knot. Now when we approach our parallel pin, we're going to very slowly pull out the pin a little bit at a time as we're moving forward. That way it continues to hold the fabric in place. Now you can sew over these other pins because this machine can handle it, but not all machines can, so always assess the situation. But there's also the possibility that a needle could break and fly into your face, so it is something that you do with caution. And once we have finished sewing, it is time to iron. So the first thing you always do is iron the stitches that you have put in. This will relax the stitching and the fabric around the stitching. Then we're going to open up our seam and we're going to finger press the seam allowance open just so that it is easy to get the iron in between the seam allowance. Now I'm applying pressure with the iron because it's called pressing because you're actually physically pressing the iron into the fabric. And here is your beautiful plain seam. Nice and flat.